So we have a great presentation lined up today. We have two people who are from Athens State University. We have Letitia Bergantz, who's a professor of instructional design, along with her colleague, Mark Gale, who's also a professor of instructional design. And we are going to get started with their presentation, 4 to Tears, Restructure Classes and Flip Meetings for Engagement. And I will turn the slide share over to our presenters.
So basically, I'm sure a lot of you guys like us have been through many Zoom meetings or different online sessions and either classes or meetings. So we're trying to look at how we could go ahead and change some of this. Again, I'm Letitia Bergantz and Mark Gale. We are both from Athens, and so hopefully we will not bore you to tears. A lot of times you come in, there's that loss of interest, you're not able to focus. So what can be done to make this a bit more engaging? So some of the research shows that instead of just throwing things online, that you should actually try to consider how to make it more interactive and engaging. So this was just a quote that I threw out here. And COVID, you could say, was the emergency that had us putting a lot of information online. So we were trying to focus on how to make it better. And we actually changed a lot of our classes at Athens. We used HighFlex. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that. With HighFlex, though, we basically had students in the classroom and they could have the choice to either join the class or they could join it virtually through like a Zoom session and then participate in all the information that was going on, or they could watch it asynchronously afterward. So they sort of had that flexibility. And with that, we found that some of the instructors were going ahead and making lots of material. They would like record all these lectures and things like that. And that just was really not so engaging. So we were trying to think of how could we change this so it would be more engaging. And what we did was we sort of used this rule of thirds where we broke the class into like 3 sections. And the first third, we had everybody come in, you had your icebreaker, kind of get to know each other. And then you would have the people log online so that they were interacting as well. They would tell you, how their week was, how their 4th of July weekend was, anything like that. Then we would begin with the lecture, and then we would have sort of a group work interaction, and then we would bring, sort of break them off into groups, and then we would bring everybody back in for this full interaction. So instead of just having your typical class, we sort of divided it so that there was interaction with the lecture, with the group work, and then with the entire class. And so with the lecture, we found that instead of some of the people that were recording hours and hours of lecture, we decided to make it short and sweet, sort of the KISS principle, keep it simple. And so we were going with that, basically adding in information. And we also added in a lot of like Kahoot games. So if we had some highly technical material or we had some that was maybe not as engaging, we thought, hey, let's go ahead and let's have it as a Kahoot game. And then after each question, we would go ahead and say, it looks like 10 people got this correct, 4 people got it incorrect. Let's talk about it. Why was this answer this way? And so that was a different way to bring it out. It was a lot more engaging. And then we also had sort of the groups come back with the constructivist theory, where instead of Mark or myself just being the instructor and telling them, here's what you do, we said, okay, here's the topic, find out about it, what makes this so, and then they would bring the information back to class and they would tell us about it. And it was a lot more engaging because they were finding it, they were sharing it with their groups, they were sharing it with the entire class. And it was really interesting to see if maybe one group felt this or another group had a totally different idea. So it really lent itself to a lot more engagement. And then we had these practical applications, like how could we have students engage with one another? So we tried out these user reviews. We teach an educational technology class. And so we had all these products like Kahoot or like Canva or picto chart, anything like that. And we were saying, instead of having each student go ahead and find out the cost and was it easy to use, and should the school actually go ahead and buy a version of that, we said we're going to have the students do sort of that Amazon review. They're going to go ahead and they'll test out the product. So as a group, you'd have one person log in to the account. They would sort of test it out. They would talk about how much it cost. They would discuss whether it was easy or hard to use. Would you use it for kindergarten? Would you use it for secondary? Things like that. And then they would say, based on this, we see that not only could you use it for making posters for parents and field trips, but you could also use it to make lessons more engaging on the website, something like that. And then they would give their recommendations. Wow, we liked it, we didn't like it, things like that. And so what we tried to do was, instead of just having them do this, we had students that were in the classroom, and we tried to divide them up in groups, and then we would have them come online, and we would put some of the virtual students, depending how many we had, in the class or in the group with the students who were actually in the class. So you had that collaboration across platforms. And we would have them make this like little presentation, and then they would have to give their opinion at the end. We give it a thumbs up, or, ooh, it's horrible, it's clunky, and we know why it's free, something to that effect. So it was really interesting, and it was really engaging. And the students, when they first started this, their PowerPoints or their presentations were very plain, but as they got going, they really beefed it up, and they were almost competing against the different groups for, we had the prettiest and best presentation, and check this out. So it was really fun to see what they ended up coming with. And then we also had open labs, because we teach the tech classes. Depending on the students in the group, you have the people who are not as familiar with technology. So this wasn't a chance to actually go through how to make a website or how to do something, maybe like a soft chalk lesson. So we offered that in-person hands-on instruction that was needed. If they had gotten to maybe a part of the lesson or the instructions, the assignment, but they were stuck, we could actually say, okay, here's where you're going wrong. And we could work with them on that. And then maybe depending on, like, one of the websites is one of the projects we have. So depending on what platform, if they were using Wix, Weebly, Google Sites, or whatever, we could say, oh, okay, so we can see that you're trying to embed a video, but that's not going as well. Here, let me show you this trick. Here's how to get the embed code. Here's how to actually do it. So we realized that they were actually feeling a lot more confident, and they were actually telling other students like, oh, I can help you with that. So it was really engaging, and I think their confidence actually went up too, which was nice. And it was all because we sort of had this open lab, and then you had other students helping other students. So we could help one person with a problem, and then students started helping. So that was really kind of neat to see. I'm going to go ahead and share it with Mark now. Thank you.
Yeah, so before I started teaching, I was director of our kind of like teaching and learning center at the school. And one of the things I hated were meetings. And it's because all the meetings usually boiled down to somebody in the front talking to us at the boss, telling us stuff that we either already knew or we could easily look up on an email or something. And then it would be us going around the room saying, well, I'm doing this and I'm doing this. A lot of times kind of building it up a little more than we probably were, but it was we got to make it sound like we're doing stuff. And again, when I was a boss, it was like, hey, I'm assuming you're doing your job. You don't need to tell me what you're doing. Let's stop that. So we hated those type of meetings. When I got into the College of Ed, we still had those type of staff meetings where it was, again, they would tell us a bunch of stuff, and then it would switch around to, okay, well, what's your department doing? And what are you doing? And then we had this one massive annual meeting that would take like a half a day or 3/4 of a day. And we're almost kind of like happy a COVID thing happened one year because it canceled that meeting because it's in April. And this year it was going to happen again. And we were like, everybody was dreading it. And we got a new dean, and we're like, please just don't do this meeting this way. So the dean sat in on some of these high flex classes we were teaching. He enjoyed the engagement. We made him do the Kahoots with the kids and all this kind of stuff. And he's like, well, I want to get that out in our meeting. And we were like, well, look, in a meeting, truly all you're really doing is passing along information to your coworkers or whoever's doing stuff. And that's what we do in the classroom too, is we're passing along information to the students or helping them get to it. So we kind of talked them into, why don't you just try this meeting in this same kind of format and we'll see if it works. We're going to have some people coming in from online because the COVID stuff, they don't want to come into the physical environment. We're going to have some that are ready to be in the physical environment. So it's the same exact setup as what the class is doing. And he took a couple of weeks to kind of come around to it, but he eventually settled on it. And we ended up kind of following the same format that we were looking at with this class. So the same thing happened. We're like, let's try it with the rule of thirds. Main rule is you can't just talk to us, just like in the classes. We don't want to lecture to them for 2 hours straight. The online kids especially are going to get super bored if we're sitting there just talking to them the entire time. So that was one rule we had to have. We got to keep it short and sweet, succinct, and the things that we want to do, you have to keep engaging. Then the second third was we said, okay, if you're not going to just give us information, we need to fill up that time with something constructive. So instead of these groups telling us what's going on in their little subgroups, which we assume they're taking care of business anyways, why don't they come to us with a problem or something? And then as a larger group, we can kind of debate that and give them some ideas on how to solve the problem. And then that last third is, okay, now that these ideas are flowing around, is there something we can do to like kind of fine tune it so the group has more information or something to work with when they go back to their individual stuff during the year? So that's kind of how we ended up following that rule of thirds like we did with our normal classes. So breaking that down some. So we started off with the introductions. Again, he's not allowed to tell us anything that's really happening. He's got to give it to us beforehand. So he sends out the agenda. He sends out all the documentation that has information in it. And then we ended up kind of gamifying it like we did with the Kahoot stuff in the classes. So it would be something like he would ask us 10 questions worth of, you know, well, how did we do with this? What was the percentage of students that graduated last year? How many of them passed the praxis? And if you didn't go and look at the documents beforehand, you were taking a stab in the dark. And he ended up having prizes like gift cards and stuff in there. So, I mean, we really started getting into it, trying to answer these questions. And then he also did some of it where it was like the group work that we had, the constructivism, where it was, okay, we did the game. Now here are some other questions I want you to go and find. Here's another report that we had done from this group. Go out and find the answers. Let's see who can find it the fastest. And so we would start kind of building up and trying to work through teams to go through and find those answers. But what it did, the whole goal was, again, he's not going to stand up there for an hour and a half telling us everything that was going on in the college. He had us actively going out there doing the stuff so that we weren't basically sitting there in another Zoom meeting getting bored to death. So then once we got through the introductions, we ended up kind of going breakout rooms. And what happened is he broke us into about 5 or 6 different committees in the college that had different tasks. And again, if I'm not in that committee, I'm assuming that committee is doing their job. But we always kind of sometimes hit roadblocks that we need to work through together and kind of collaboratively. So whoever was in charge of that, chairing that little committee, we set them up they had to do an introduction of what was going on, what was the problem they were having, and then ask a leading question. This is what I need your help to solve. Then we would break up into groups and it would bounce around. So like Dr. Bergantz and I were on the tech side of the house, and we ended up, the biggest problem we have is the students would say that they knew the technology when graduating, but when they were actually in the field and we did post surveys, they weren't using any of the technology, and we're kind of getting hammered on that on their evaluations. So we were like, okay, we need to start propagating the technology through more classes than just the one tech class. So that's where we set up the question of, if we don't want to add another class to the curriculum with technology, what are some ideas on how to push this through so they're using more tech throughout the curriculum? Then we punted them into the breakout groups and they started working together to try and figure this stuff out for us. So then, one thing we said is they had to turn their webcams on, because I know, I'll admit it, probably you guys too, we had meetings during COVID where the camera was broken, but because we knew it was going to be one of those meetings and we were probably doing something on the side while listening, and then every once in a while we'd jump in with a question so the boss thought we were there. We didn't want to do that. They had to come on the camera, so we knew they were actively engaged. And what we ended up seeing, a lot of us hadn't seen each other. And so they started doing the, oh, hey, how's it going, Dr. Bergantz? Haven't seen you in a while. It's so great to see. So even though they weren't there, they were still getting those relationships and those connections back because they were actually sharing on the webcam. They got to see each other in the groups. So we had to make sure they stayed on topic. They answered the questions. Most of the time when they started veering off, it was more, again, just kind of catching up with people you hadn't seen. Because when you're in a 40-person meeting, you can't get that personal. When you got 5 in the room that you know, it gets a little bit easier. But they ended up coming up with all these different ideas, and we told them compile it down to your main 2 points. And once they got to the main 2 points, that's what we would end up bringing them back into the bigger group with. Now, they still had it written down so that they had all these ideas at some point, but we only wanted to take the time because there's, again, 6 different groups doing this, 6 of those different committees. We wanted to make sure we hit the high points. So when we came back to the group, they would bring in the main points. We'd list them up on the board. He gave about an extra 10 minutes at the end of that because, say, Bergantz and I are in a group here, and we kind of came up with some ideas, but all of a sudden when we're hearing what group 3 ended up coming up with, it jars something like light bulb style in our head. So he gave us 10 minutes to kind of throw out a couple extra softballs like that if we wanted to. Then we ended up prioritizing the list using some polling features like poll everywhere. And once the list was prioritized, he came up with action items of, hey, these are the things I want the committee to look at. Here's some other stuff in case you guys get time, but these are the top priorities the college has kind of agreed on we need to look at. Then he passed it back off to the group, and that's what they would end up working on the year. So now they've got collective information, brainstorming, group work from all of us to give them extra ideas. But more importantly, the meeting was fun. We weren't sitting there bored to death. It ended up going, I think, what was it, 4 hours?
Yeah.
It was like about 4 hours, but we had a good time doing it. I mean, in the end, he like brought a chicken in for the person that won the most stuff. It was crazy, but it was a good time. And after he pulled them afterwards, we were actually looking forward to next year's meeting. We have no problem with going to the meeting where we were dreading this beforehand. So again, it was just switching it around and making this actively engaging in a meeting environment rather than just a classroom environment. But here you can see it followed the exact same process. We kind of broke it into thirds, had the same rules. You can't just talk the whole time. You have to get the students doing hands-on. You have to get them on the webcam so that they're all working together. They're seeing each other. They're growing together in those relationships. It just, again, worked out in a meeting scenario, in a business scenario, the same way it would in a classroom. So that was one case that we had with it. We have not tried a second meeting with that yet, but he has said when the fall starts back, he even wants our monthly meetings to go into this format where it's no longer him just talking and praying that somebody else speaks up. He's going to try and do this intentional engagement in there so that, again, ideas are flowing and we are actually talking and enjoying being together. So I think with that, let you kind of wrap it up. Tish, have you got anything else?
Yeah. So basically the classes that we've done sort of with flipping it to the thirds and the meetings, we've had really good reviews from the students as well as the people who were stuck in the meetings. And it's been really positive. So we think we're going to sort of try to use that in the future. And hopefully you guys might get a couple tips and tricks to try out too. Thank you all very much.
All right, that's fantastic. Thank you, Mark and Tisha, for that. If there are any questions, we have the chat open, or you can unmute yourself if you would like.
We got most of the images from Unsplash. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but they have some really great ones out there. So that's primarily where most of ours come from.
Excellent. Yeah, I love the theme that you had going on in your presentation. That's super cute. I like it. Okay, let me move over to the chat here. I don't see any questions coming through in the chat screen. So if you have them, let us know. Otherwise, Dawn, if you will throw up our presentation. Again, thank you guys so much, Mark and Tisha. That was an excellent presentation. We appreciate that very much. And upcoming, we have a couple of sessions. We have 2 left in our summer series. We have July 16th, Dr. Derek Griffey, who will be presenting best practices from online teaching at its best, the merging of instructional design with teaching and learning research, which sounds like a great time. And then on July 23rd, we have Aiden's own Sarah Ramaya, who will be presenting big ideas to small learnings and how to implement backward design. So we definitely hope that you guys will join us for that. And we are looking forward to those. There are several ways you can connect with us. The primary one is through our website, which is listed there. And we also will take the recordings from these sessions and will be posted on our YouTube channel. You guys can go out and subscribe to that so you don't miss any session postings. We have Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and all of those are relatively active. So you can go out and engage with us there, tell your friends. We'll post different things related to what's going on with our sessions and events, also job postings. If you guys ever see anything that's posted or have anything posted at your workplace, let us know. We can get the word out for you through our socials as well. And if there are no questions, and I currently don't see any, we'll give you back some time in your day. So thank you so much again, Dr. Gale and Dr. Bergantz. We very much appreciate it. And we thank everybody for joining today. We will get the recording up and we'll post when that's available to you guys.
Thank you for your presentation. It was great. So many great ideas.
Yes,
Well,
excellent tips.
We
Thank you
appreciate
for
the
the
opportunity.
time. As long as you guys don't kill us in meetings, we're good.
Yeah, this is great. Excellent. You guys have a great afternoon.
All right, have a
Thank
good
you,
one, guys.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.